So good morning to everyone. So let's begin today's lecture. So in the last lecture, we were looking at this equivalence of regular expressions and the finite state automatons, right? So we said that okay, so for every regular expression, we can construct a finite state automaton. We can construct an epsilon NFA, right? So which means that every language that is described by a regular expression is also a regular language. But we also want to show the other part, right, which is that if a language is regular, then there exists a regular expression which would describe that language. Right? So towards that end, we basically went through this construction, right, of this regular expression given a finite state automaton, right? So we start with a DFA, uh, which we know, right? So for every regular language there exists a DFA which accepts that language, whose language is that language. So we start with a DFA and then we construct this regular expression, right? uh, but this is a very strange sort of induction, right? Because DFA, right, is in general some graph on say n nodes, right? So if the DFA has n states, then the graph of the DFA is going to have n nodes, and this DFA would be some graph over these n nodes, right? So it can have arbitrary cycles, right, and an arbitrary number of edges, right? So how do we construct this regular expression inductively, right? Uh, so towards that end, right, what we did was that we introduced this notion of a k path. So we said that okay, so a k path is a path in the DFA which basically only goes through nodes which are numbered 1 to k, right? So which means that all the nodes in the path, right? So we said that okay, all the nodes in the DFA are going to be numbered 1 to n, and in a k path, right, the k path can begin and end from any arbitrary state or any arbitrary node, but all the intermediate nodes in this k path must have values or must have indices which are less than or equal to k. Okay. So the reason that we introduced this notion of k path, right, is because we want a regular expression, right, which describes the language of this DFA. So the language of the DFA is basically the set of all paths, right, from the start state to one of the final states. So in particular, it's the labels, right, on those paths from the start state to the final state. So that's how. So we basically said that okay, so instead of considering all these paths, right, from the start state to the final state, we will construct these paths one by one, right, in an inductive fashion. So we'll first look at a zero path, right? So a zero path is going to be a path without any intermediate vertices, right? And then a one path, two path, and so on, right? And we have this observation, right, that a k path can be constructed from k minus one paths. So this is because a k path can be divided, right, into a number of smaller k minus one subpaths. So this observation is based on the fact that if you look at a k path, right, from I to j, then there are only two possibilities, right? So this k path may never go through the state k, right? So in which case it's basically a k minus one path from I to j, right? Or it can go through the state k multiple times, right? But if it does go through the state k one or more times, then we can sort of divide this path, or we can divide this path into multiple k minus one paths. Right? So in particular, we consider the first visit to the state k. Okay, so this is this rik k minus one. Okay, so this is the path from I to k, right? So since this is the first time I'm visiting k, I would not have visited k before. So therefore, this is going to be a k minus one path, and then I can visit k multiple times, right? But for every such visit to k, right, if you consider any such consecutive visits to k, then that's going to be a k minus one path. So that's why we have this rkk k minus one. And finally, from the last time that I visit k, I visit j again. Right? So again, since this is the last time I visit k, I'm not going to visit k again. So which means that this is going to be a k minus one path as well. Okay. So that's how we can sort of divide this big k path into a bunch of smaller k minus one paths. Which means that if we have the regular expressions for k minus one paths, then we can construct the regular expression for the k paths. So are there any questions, right, regarding this construction? Okay, so once we have this Rijn, so we'll do this. We'll do this for every pair of states I and j, and an n path, right? Where n is the number of states in the DFA. So once we have Rijn, we know that the language of the DFA, right, is the set of all n paths from the start state to one of the final states. So therefore, it's going to be the sum of all this capital Rijn, right, which are the regular expressions corresponding to those paths. And we also worked out this example, right, in class. So in particular, we worked out what was, so let me write it down. So we worked out R233, 3. So we worked out this R233 using the construction that we just discussed. Okay? So this is the final expression for R233. Okay. Yeah. Right. So let's discuss the complexity, right? Time and space complexity of this procedure. Okay. So right. So what are we doing? Right. So we are constructing this Rijn, right, for every pair of states I and j, right, and n, right, where n is the number of states in the DFA, right. So how many regular expressions are we constructing? So we need to construct this Rijk for every pair of states I and j, and for k is equal to 1 to n. So because we are doing this in an inductive fashion, right? So we will first construct Rij0 for yeah. So we'll first construct Rij1, uh, and then Rij2, Rij3, and so on. Right? And for Rijk, we are going to use the regular expressions Rijk minus 1. So we will do this for any I and j, and for k equal to 1 to n. So what are the total number of regular expressions that we are constructing? Anyone? Yes. So Vikram is saying n cube. So that's correct. Yeah. Thanks. Kaustav is also saying n cube. So that's correct. So we are generating. So we need to generate a total of n cube regular expressions. Right? So this is just to get at that final regular expression, right, for the language, right, which is the sum of the regular expression for the start state and the final and one of the final states. So, but what is the size of each regular expression, right? So the size of a regular expression at any stage k can be 4 times the size of the regular expression at stage k minus 1. So this is because of the way the formula for Rk is written, right? So the k path, right? We just deconstructed the k path in terms of 4 different k minus 1 paths, right? So that's why the size of a regular expression at any stage k would be 4 times, or could be 4 times the size of the regular expression at stage k minus 1. So how many stages are there? There are a total of n stages, okay? And at each state, or rather at each stage, we are going to quadruple the size of this regular expression. Right? So what could be the size of the final regular expression? Anyone? Okay, so Vikram is saying order of 4 to the power n. Yeah, so that's correct. So the total size at the end could be is basically order of 4 to the power n. So this is because you're quadrupling at every stage, right? So at the end of stage 1, you may have a regular expression of size 4, and then at the end of stage 2, you would have 4 square. At the end of stage 3, you would have 4 cube, and so on. Right? So since there are n stages, the total size would be 4 to the power n. So which means that the total time taken, right? we have to do this for each one of these n cube regular expressions, right? So total time taken could be as much as order of n cube and 4 to the power n. So this means that this is actually a very expensive procedure, right? In terms of both time complexity and space complexity. Uh, so there is also an alternative method to convert. Yeah, lecture later. Yeah, later. Not now. Yeah, sorry about that. So there could be so there is an alternative method, right, to convert a DFA to an RE. So this method is slightly more better in terms of time and space complexity. So we won't actually go through the details of this method, but let me just sort of briefly introduce it, right? So in this method, right, instead of constructing this k paths, what we do, right, is that we remove the states from the automaton one by one, and then we reroute the paths which are going through the eliminated states. Okay, so so in order to so let me just illustrate this, right? So let's say that you have some automaton, right, with states I and j, okay, and then you have the state k. So what we will do, right, is that at every step of this procedure, we are going to remove a state which is not a start state or a final state. So let's say that this state k here is a state that's not a start state or it's not a final state, right? So we will eliminate this state, right? And when we eliminate the state, we need to make sure, right, that this path from I to j, which has this label A and B, right, should still be present. Right? So the way we do that is that we'll basically add a new edge from I to j. Okay? But the label of this new edge is going to be this regular expression AB. Okay? So this basically means that the paths between states are still preserved, right? But the intermediate states are removed. Okay? So now, if for example there was a self loop, right, from K, let's say with the symbol C, right? Then we would have added this regular expression A C star B from I to J. Okay. So the way we will remove the states, right, is that we will make sure that the paths that are present between the other states, right, are still preserved even after the removal of the states, right? And in order to make sure and in order to ensure that, we will add new edges in the DFA, and these edges, right, will now be labeled by regular expressions instead of by symbols. Right? So what we have is basically a new type of DFA, right? Because a DFA, right, in general, does not allow regular expressions, right, as labels of its edges. Right? So every transition must be a symbol, but now a transition can also happen on a regular expression. Right? So this type of an automaton is also called a generalized finite automaton. So we'll keep on doing this for all states except the start state and the final state. So there is a very systematic way in which you can do this, right? And finally, right, so at the end we will have this very small automaton, which will just have the start state and the final states, and all the edges, right, of this automaton are going to be labeled by the corresponding regular expressions, right? So we can then directly see what is the regular expression for the language of this automaton. So as I said, I will not go through this procedure in details, right? So there are more details that can be found in the books, in particular in the chapters and the sections that I just noted. So you can go through this on your own. Okay. Okay. So let's summarize what we have learned so far, right? From the section of regular expression, right? So we have been looking at regular languages, right? And we have looked at three types of automaton: deterministic finite automaton, a non-deterministic finite automaton, and an epsilon NFA. And we said that all of these three representations, right, are basically equivalent. Right? Means that all of them only accept regular languages. And we also looked at regular expressions, which is another way to describe regular languages. And we said that this is also equivalent to each of these finite automatons that we have discussed. Okay. So all these four representations basically express the same language, right? The same set of languages, right? Which are the set of regular languages. So just to summarize, right? So we have looked at DFAs, and then we looked at NFAs. We looked at epsilon NFA, and we looked at regular expressions, right? And we saw, right, that so we have seen this procedure, right, that given an NFA, how to construct a DFA, right, which accepts the same language. We also seen this procedure. So this procedure is the subset construction procedure. We also seen this procedure for how to convert an epsilon NFA into an NFA, right? So given an epsilon NFA, how to construct an NFA which accepts the same language. We have seen this procedure for how to construct an epsilon NFA given a regular expression. So given a regular expression, we can construct an epsilon NFA whose language is going to be same as the language of the regular expression. And finally, right, we have also seen this, right, so just to complete this loop, that given a DFA, right, how to construct a regular expression corresponding to that DFA. So uh, so this basically completes the loop, right? So given given a regular language, right, in terms of any of these four representations, we can we have automated procedures, right, to construct the other representations of that particular regular language. Right? So for example, if you are say given a regular expression, right, and you want to construct the DFA corresponding to that regular expression, then you can go through this path, right? So you can first construct epsilon NFA, then the NFA, and finally the DFA. Similarly, you can do this for any other pair of representations of the regular language. Okay. Right. So finally, let's also take a brief look at some algebraic laws for regular expressions. Right. So we said earlier that these regular expressions are basically an algebraic way to look at regular languages. Right? So in particular, right, we introduced this operators, this plus operator, the concatenation operator, and the star operator. Okay, so we will see that this plus operator, right, and this concatenation operator sort of are similar to regular addition, right, and multiplication that we use for natural numbers, right, or integers. So in particular, yeah, so this union and concatenation, right, which is this plus and dot. These operators behave sort of like addition and multiplication. So in particular, if you take this plus operator, which is this union operator, then this plus operator is both commutative. So alpha plus beta is the same as beta plus alpha, and it's also associative. Right? So which means that alpha plus beta plus gamma is equivalent to alpha plus beta plus gamma. And the concatenation operator is also associative, right? So we saw the equivalent, or we saw this expression, right, corresponding to associativity of the concatenation operator. Okay. Moreover, we also saw that the concatenation operator, right, distributes over plus. So it's in particular this alpha plus beta dot gamma is equal to alpha gamma plus beta gamma. The only exception is that concatenation is not commutative, right? So unlike regular multiplication over integers or natural numbers, which is actually commutative, the concatenation operator is not commutative. Is not commutative, but in other ways, right? It does behave like the integer addition and integer multiplication. Okay? And so just like regular integer addition multiplication has identities and annihilators, right? Even for regular expressions, we also have identities and annihilators, right? So in particular, right? So we know that 0, for example, is basically an identity for addition, which means that 0 plus any number n is equal to n itself. So if you consider this plus, right, as let's say the union, right, for regular expressions, then what's the identity for regular expressions? Anyone? Yeah, yeah, phi. That's correct. Right? So phi is the identity for regular expressions, right? So phi is a regular expression, right? First of all, and phi plus any regular expression alpha, right, is equivalent to alpha itself. So if you, yeah, if you take a union of the empty set with any regular expression, then you get that corresponding regular expression itself. Okay? So that's why phi is sort of like the identity, right? So for multiplication as well, right? It behaves like an annihilator. In particular, we know that for integer multiplication, right, or for any multiplication, 0 into n is equal to 0. And this is also true for concatenation in the case of regular expressions. Right? That phi concatenated with any regular expression is equivalent to phi. Uh, so in this case, so this phi is basically an annihilator. So for the concatenation operator, it basically functions like an annihilator. Right. And we also seen so one, for example, right, is the identity for multiplication. One integer multiplication. Right? So we know that 1 into n is equal to n. So what's the identity for concatenation operator? Yeah. So Madhav said epsilon. So that's correct, right? So epsilon concatenated with any regular expression, right, is basically equivalent to epsilon itself. So this is because if you concatenate the empty string with any other string, then you get that particular string itself. Right? So that's why this epsilon behaves like an identity uh, for the concatenation operator. Okay? So it's similar to one in that case. So yeah. So phi is the identity for addition. Epsilon is the identity for concatenation, and phi is also the annihilator for concatenation. Right. So with that, we are going to finish the section on regular expressions. Okay. So if anyone has any questions, right, or doubts regarding this topic of regular expressions, then yeah, you can ask now. Okay. Yeah. So let's move forward. So the next topic that we're going to cover is about closure properties of regular languages. So far we have been talking about languages, right? Or so we know that each language is a set of strings, right? And we have basically and we have basically looked at this specific type of language, which is called a regular language, and we have looked at we looked at different representations of regular languages, right? But now, right, instead of talking about just sets of strings, we are going to talk about sets of languages. Right? So in particular, we're going to look at the class of all regular languages, and we're going to say things about all regular languages. So we're going to prove properties that hold for all regular languages. Right? So this is also called a language class. Right? So a language class is a set of languages. So we have seen one example, which is the regular languages. So this is a language class. It's a set of all possible regular languages that you can construct over some alphabet, right? And we will see other examples of language classes later on in the course. So these language classes, right, have two important kinds of properties. Right? So these are closure properties and decision properties. So whenever we say that, okay, something is a property of a language class, right, we mean that every language that is possible, right, in that particular class has this property. So when we talk about, for example, closure properties of regular languages, we mean that every regular language is going to have this property. Okay, so what are these closure properties and what are decision properties? So let's first look at closure properties. So a closure property of a language class says that given languages in the class, An operator produces another language in the same class. So which means that, so what this is saying, right, is that if you're given two languages, right, or if you're given a language in the same class, okay, and if you perform some operations on those languages, then you produce another language in the same class. So for example, if you are given two regular languages, right, and you take their union, right, so then does it produce another regular language or not? So there are many such operators that you can perform, right? So, or many such operations that you can perform on languages. Since a language is a set of strings, so you can take union of two languages, you can take intersection, you can take complement, you can take difference, right? You can take concatenation, you can take the asterisk operator, and so on. So all of these are operations that you can perform on any arbitrary language, right, from the class, and then the closure property would say that, okay, if you perform these operations on languages, do you get the new language that you get, does it belong in the same class or not? So this is a very obvious example, right? So these regular languages, right, are obviously closed under union, concatenation, and Kleene closure, right? So this Kleene closure, right, is basically another terminology that's used for the asteroid operator. So this is the same as the asteroid operator, which is this L star that we have seen so far. And this operation is also called Kleene closure. So it's obvious that regular languages are closed under union, concatenation, and Kleene closure, right? And the reason is that we can use the RE representation, right, of regular languages. So we know that for every regular language, there exists a regular expression which corresponds to that language. Right? And since we know that regular expressions themselves are closed under union, concatenation, and Kleene closure, right? Because these are the three main operators of a regular expression, right? So if you're given two regular expressions, right, you can always add them, right, or take their union and get another regular expression. Similarly, if you're given two regular expressions, you can concatenate them and you can get another regular expression. And if you're given a regular expression, you apply the asterisk operator, you get another regular expression. Right? So since the output of all of these operators is another regular expression, which is by definition, right? And therefore, since every regular expression that corresponds to a regular language, that's why the regular languages are closed under union, concatenation, and Kleene closure. Right? So we know that under these three operations, right, we don't really need to prove, the proof rather is very straightforward, right? So it's very easy to see that regular languages are going to be closed under these three operators. But let's also look at other operators, right, to see whether or not regular languages are also closed under them. So before that, we should also ask this question, right? That why are we interested in these closure properties? Okay. So why is it that, for example, we want to know that is the union of two regular languages regular, or is the intersection of two regular languages regular, and so on? Okay. So there are two reasons why we are interested in these closure properties. Okay. So the first reason is that it would help us to construct an automaton for more complex languages. So this is particularly evident if you consider the intersection operation, right? So we will see that regular languages are also closed under intersection. So which means that if you want to construct, let's say, a finite automaton, right, for a language, right, such that which consists of some set of strings over the binary alphabet, where say, for example, the length of the string is even, right, and the number of ones are odd, or something like that, right? So if you have more than one property that you want your language to satisfy, right, then you can easily construct this automaton by using the intersection operator. Right? So in particular, you can construct the automaton for the smaller properties, right? And then from this smaller automaton, you can construct the more complex automaton. Right? So we will see how to automatically construct an automaton for this intersection operator. Okay, so which means that we can sort of divide a more complex problem, right, into a bunch of smaller sub problems, and then we can construct automaton for each of those smaller sub problems, which would then automatically give us the automaton for the more complex problem. So that's one of the reasons why closure properties are useful, right? So and the other reason is that it's actually going to help us to show the languages which are not in the class of regular languages. So this is another important property, right? So not all languages are regular. We have already seen some examples of languages which are not regular. So how do we show that a language is not regular? And one of the ways in which we can do this, right, is by using the closure properties of regular languages. Okay. Uh, so are there any questions so far? Okay, so let's use it. Let's illustrate this point number two, right, using an example. So we said that we want to use closure properties to show that a language is not regular. So how should we do that? Right? So let's look at a concrete example. So let's look at this language. Right? So this is this language L1, which is of the form 0 to the power n and 1 to the power n, which means that it basically consists of some n number of zeros followed by the same n number of ones. Okay. So examples would be 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, and so on. Okay. Yeah. So we can easily prove that this language is not a regular language. So let's first of all assume that this language is not a regular language. Right? So we will see how we can very easily prove this. But let's assume for the moment that this is not a regular language. So let's say that we are now looking at this other language L2. Okay, so this language L2 is described as follows, right? So it's the set of strings over 0 and 1 with an equal number of zeros and ones. Okay, so the set of strings over 0 and 1 with an equal number of zeros and ones. So note that L1, right, is basically a subset of L2, but L2 can have many more strings. Right? So for example, 1010 is in L2. Similarly, you can take 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, something like that. So as long as the string has equal number of zeros and ones, then it's in L2. So this language L2 is also not regular. But this fact is very tricky to prove, right? So in particular, we can't, well, so the way that we proved that L1 is not regular, we can't use the same technique to prove that L2 is not regular as well. Okay. However, we can use the closure property now. So if we know that L1 is not regular, then we can use the closure property to show that L2 is also not regular. Okay. So how can we do that? Right? Any suggestions? So so we know that, for example, regular languages are closed under intersection. Right? So can we use the fact that regular languages are closed under intersection to show that? So we'll use two facts, right? So we'll use that regular languages are closed under intersection, and we will use the fact that L1 uh, is not regular. So we will use these two facts to show that L2 is also not regular. So any suggestions for how we can do that? Okay, so Kaustav is saying that a string that has all zeros followed by all ones is regular. That's correct. So we can take intersection. Intersection of what? So intersection requires two languages, right? So I have this string, this language, right, which is all zeros followed by all ones. So this is the 0 star 1 star. So this is definitely regular. And then what? Okay, so we assume that, okay, so you're talking about a proof by contradiction. So we know that the 0 star 1 star is regular. We assume that L2 is regular, and then we take intersection with this. Yeah, that's correct, right? So if you take the 0 star 1 star, we know that that's regular. If you assume that L2 is regular, then the intersection of these two should also be regular, but the intersection of these two languages. So what's their intersection? Yeah, that's right. So it's L1. Right? So the intersection of 0 star 1 star and L2 is L1. Right? So this is because so every string in L in this 0 star 1 star, right, is zeros followed by ones. And since L2 says that the number of zeros should be equal to the number of ones, so that would mean that the intersection would be the 0 and 1, right, where you have a set of you have a sequence of n zeros and they're followed by the same number of ones as well, right, n ones. So now if L2 were to be regular, then since we know that regular languages are closed in the intersection, therefore 0 star 1 star intersection L2 should also be regular. But their intersection is L1. We also know that, but we know that L1 is not regular. So that's a contradiction. So that's why L2 cannot be regular. So yeah, so this is sort of demonstrating another use of closure properties. Right? So from the fact that so we know that some languages are very easy to show that they are not regular, right? We can then show that more complex languages are also not regular. Okay, good. So any questions regarding this proof? Okay. Yeah, this is saying the same thing that I just wrote down. Okay. So now that we are motivated, right, that why we are interested in closure properties, let's actually go through some operators one by one, right, and prove that regular languages are actually closed under them. Right? So let's first consider closure under union. So we have already seen that this is very straightforward to show. So if L and M are regular languages, then so is L union M. And the proof is based on the representation of regular language as a regular expression. So if you take L and M, right, to be languages of regular expressions alpha and beta, right? And we know that we can do this, right, because a regular expression is a valid representation of a regular language. So we've already shown this previously. Okay, so if alpha and beta are regular expressions, then alpha plus beta is also a regular expression. This is by definition of a regular expression, right? And since we know that every language of a regular expression is also a regular language, that would mean that L union M, right, is also regular. And similarly, you can do this for concatenation and Kleene closure as well. So it's the same idea, right? So if you take alpha and beta as regular expressions for this languages L and M, then alpha beta is a regular expression whose language is LM, and alpha star is a regular expression whose language is L star. And we know that both of these are regular languages, and therefore these are also regular languages. So let's look at closure under intersection. Right? So this is more interesting. Right? So intersection is something that's not covered by any of the operators of regular expressions. Right? So how should we how can we go about proving that regular languages are closed under intersection? So any suggestions for how should we do this? Okay, yeah. So Alan Joel is saying that we can construct a DFA. So we are okay. So you are saying that we should use the DFA based representation of regular languages. So if you are given to regular languages L and M, we know that there exists DFAs, right, corresponding to these regular languages. So from these two DFAs, we construct another DFA uh, for the whose language is going to be the intersection of those two languages. Right? So that's correct. Right? So first of all, regular languages are actually closed under intersection, which means that if L and M are regular, then L intersection M is also regular. And to prove this, right, we are basically going to use the DFA-based construction. Right? So if A and B are DFAs whose languages are L and M respectively, then we are going to construct this new DFA, right, which is C. Right? So this construction is also called the product automaton of A and B. Right? And we will show that the language of this C, right, is equal to L intersection M. So that would mean that there exists a DFA, right, C, which accepts this language L intersection M, and that would mean that this L intersection M is also regular. Okay. So let's see how we can construct this product automaton. So the general idea behind the product automaton, right, is that if you're given two DFAs, right, uh, so you sort of process both of those DFAs simultaneously, right, on the string. Okay, so whenever so both of those DFAs basically move in lockstep, right? In the sense that if you're processing a string, right, and you see and you see a symbol from the string, right, you consider the transitions that are made by both of these DFAs, right, and and that's what you maintain, right? So you basically move both of those DFAs simultaneously, right? On every symbol of the string, and that's how you construct the product automaton. So let's say that you are given these two automatons A and B, right? So this is the phi tuple corresponding to these two automatons, right? So we have Q1 sigma delta 1 S1 and F1, which is A, and Q2 sigma delta 2 S2 and F2, which is B. So notice that sigma is the same. So this is an assumption that we make, right? That the input alphabet is the same for both the DFAs, right? Which means that it's the same for both the languages as well. So then this product automaton C, right, is given as follows, right? So this product automaton C, the state space of this product automaton is the product of Q1 and Q2. It's Q1 cross Q2. The input alphabet is sigma. We will see how to construct this delta, which is the transition function. The start state, right, is this tuple S1 comma S2. Right? Since since every state in C, right, is going to be a two tuple, right, of a state from A and a state from B. So the start state would be the start state of A, which is S1, and the start state of B, which is S2. And the final states, the set of final states are F1 cross F2. And this transition function is defined in a very straightforward fashion. Right? So as I said, on every symbol of the alphabet, right, we will basically move both the two automatons simultaneously. Right? So delta of Q1 comma Q2A, right? So this Q1 comma Q2 is a tuple. So this is going to be a state of C. Right? So since this belongs to Q1 cross Q2, right? So from a state in C, if I see if I basically the next symbol that I see is A, right? Then I'm going to move to a new state of C. Right? So this new state of C is going to be another tuple, right? And the two components of this tuple are going to be delta 1 Q1A and delta 2 Q2A. Right? So I'm going to move the two automatons according to the transition functions of the two automatons. Right? So I'm going to move. So in the case of the automaton A, I'm going to use the transition function delta 1. For automaton B, I'm going to use the transition function delta 2. And I'm going to construct the new state of this automaton C out of these two states. Okay. All right. And then we can show it by induction that if this is how we have defined the transition function, then the extended transition function delta hat, it satisfies this property. Right? The delta hat of this Q1, Q2, and W is equal to delta hat of Q1W comma delta hat of Q2W, which means that if you're processing this entire string W, right, on this tuple of states Q and Q2, then this is the same as processing the string on the first alphabet, processing the on the first automaton, processing the string on the second automaton, and then combining the two states together. Right? So I'll leave this as a homework to show by induction. And now that we have this product automaton, we can show that its language, right, LC is going to be LA intersection LB. So this is very straightforward, right? Because so how do we define? Let's do this, right? So how do we define the language of an automaton? Right? So if W belongs to LC, right, then what can we say about W? Right? So we can say that this extended transition function delta hat, right, of S1, S2, comma C, right, uh, is basically going to belong to F1 cross F2, comma W. So this is the definition of the acceptance of a string, right? Uh, so if you apply the extended transition function delta hat, right, beginning from the start state of C, which is S1, comma S2, on the string W, then you will end up in one of the final states. So this final state will be F1 cross F2. Right? So we have just shown though that this delta hat S1 S2 W is the same as delta hat of S1 comma W, and so this is delta 1 hat, delta 2 hat of S2 comma W. So this would belong to F1 cross F2. Right? So this is because so you can prove this using induction, right? The delta hat of S1 S2 W is the same as delta hat of S1 comma W, comma delta 1 hat of S1 comma W, and delta 2 hat of S2 comma W. But then this means that this delta 1 hat, right, of S1 comma W, this would then belong to F1, right? And this delta 2 hat of S2 comma W is going to belong to F2. So which means that this W would be accepted by both L1, L of A and L of B, right? So this means that W will belong to L of A intersection L of B. Yeah. So this so we basically shown that this product automaton, right, exactly accepts the intersection of the two corresponding automatons, right? The languages of the two corresponding automatons. Yeah. Okay. So let's illustrate this using this example, right? So let's say these are the two automatons. So on the left hand side, I have the two automatons, right? And on the right hand side, I have the product automaton. And this product automaton can be constructed from the two automatons, right, as shown by the procedure that we have just followed in the last slides. Right? So let's look at these two constituent automatons, right? So the two smaller automatons. So what's the language of the first automaton? This one. Yes, anyone? Yeah, odd number of ones. Yeah, that's correct. Right? So this is odd number of ones. And what about the second automaton? Yeah. So Ajit Reddy is saying ending with one, right? So that's correct. So now right, this product automaton, so the language of this product automaton will be the set of all strings which have odd number of ones and which end with one. The cost of distance at epsilon is also accepted. That's also correct. So we can add epsilon as well. Yeah. So the language of this product automaton. So what's going to be the language of the product automaton? Which is this one. So it's basically going to be the intersection of the two, right? So which means that so we will have set of strings with odd number of ones, and which would end with 1. And so this basically motivates, right? Uh, One of the requirement, or one of the reasons, right, for why we are looking at closure properties. Right? So if you were to directly try to construct an automata, right, which whose language satisfies this property, right? Set of all strings with odd number of ones and ending with 1, then it would likely be a more complex procedure, right? So, however, from the you can basically construct the two smaller automatons, right, which are very straightforward to construct, right, and then directly construct the product automaton. So let's look at the product automaton. Right? So here, every state of the product automaton is a two tuple, right? So it's Q1 cross Q2. So therefore, you have AC, you have AD, you have BC, and you have BD, right? And the transitions, right, are basically directly follow the transitions of the two individual automatons. Right? And if you actually look at this automaton very carefully, right, the product automaton, then by looking at this automaton, right, you should be able to figure out that its language is actually the intersection, right, so which is this set of all strings with odd number of ones and ending with 1. Okay. Okay. So yeah, good. Okay, so I'm almost out of time, so let's do this tomorrow, right? So tomorrow we are going to look at other such operators, right? In particular, we are going to look at set difference, right? And we're also going to look at reversal, right? And see whether or not regular languages are also closed under these operations. Okay. So yeah, so let's finish the lecture today. Thank you.